Between 1930 and 1980, around 500,000 Australians grew up in children's homes or orphanages. They were all raised without love, and the government estimates that half suffered physical and psychological abuse.
What we're asking people to believe is that normal, adult, church-going people in Australia ill-treated children on a really huge scale.
It's a secret, shameful history. Two remarkable women spent 10 years fighting for this dark story to be recognised and accepted.
We're waiting for people to acknowledge that this is a social justice issue that's long overdue, and they're still fucking considering it.
Finally, the federal government admitted the truth.
We come together today to say to you that we are sorry.
And gave them a name, the Forgotten Australians. When Joanna Penglaze grew up and became a mother, she realised she could no longer avoid the story of her past and her own lost mother.
I went into a home which was not really typical of homes across Australia. It was a small home run as a business by two women, a mother and a daughter. The daughter took an interest in me and she took me over as her baby. I'm sure my mother wanted to come and get us. She said, I put you there for 3 weeks while I got on my feet. But she couldn't get on her feet. I'm sure she never intended to leave us there, but she had to. And then I started thinking, I've got to try and understand what happened to me. I went back to university and I ended up doing a PhD. And I was looking for people to interview for my thesis because there was no other way of finding out anything much at all about this history.
Joanna put an ad in 150 papers in New South Wales, and I saw this ad in the back room of my house. And I couldn't believe that somebody was interested in us. When I first went to St Catherine's, our mother had deserted the family home. She must have walked away for a good reason, but I don't understand how a woman could abandon 7 children.
Oh, yes, Jane. The foster parents at Hamilton, how many years did you stay with them?
Joanna and Leonie set up a national support and advocacy group in 2000. It became an extended family for people who had lost their own. They called it Clan. Their task is to lobby for and support care leavers and listen to stories. People are desperate to be heard and find someone who believes them.
You must be Saffron. Yes. Hello, I'm Leonie. Nice to meet you too.
Yeah, this is when I arrived, and this is after I'd been there for a little while. They cut off all our hair, changed our identity. At that stage, they kept the two of us together, my sister and I. So that was the cottage that we stayed at, and when we arrived at like midnight.
Wilfred didn't take you there with your mum?
I don't think so.
Right.
I was 2.5, so yeah, I just remember basically being dropped off.
CLAN stands for Care Leavers Australia Network, and it covers everybody who grew up in some form of care, such as institutional care, orphanages, children's homes, training schools, foster care, the child migrants and the stolen generation.
As I lay me down to sleep, I pray the Lord my soul to keep.
They often bring members together to share their past. Today, they're going to former children's homes in Goulburn.
And I starved the chooks for 2 days. I filled up their little water bowl things with the older wine. I'm there, laughing my head off. She's crying for me because she knew I'd get into trouble. And the next minute it was near the church and the nuns all come out. What's going on here? And the chooks are going around the yard. Falling over.
CLAN is a grassroots organisation and it's run by care leavers for care leavers.
We wanted to support people.
We wanted to make the history visible, remember, didn't we?
Because no one was talking about it. People didn't, when we started, people didn't even know what we were talking about. Just couldn't connect.
Until the 1970s, parents often brought their children into care when the marriage failed or they fell on hard times. There was no single-parent pension or childcare, and they were desperate.
I was unaware that my mother was sick. She never showed or expressed that she was unwell. I was about 7, going on to 8 years old, and all I remember is everything feeling quite swimmy for me, feeling very unsure and unconfident of what was happening.
After World War II, Australian life was centred around the nuclear family. Dad went out to work and Mum stayed at home. If your family fell apart, you were in trouble. If the kids were considered neglected, child welfare and the police took them away. Half the children in care were there by force. They became wards of the state.
This was a childhood not like any other childhood that an Australian child of the time was having. We were second-class citizens. We didn't need what other children needed. So any care was good enough.
The demand for children's homes grew rapidly during the baby boom. They had various names: orphanages, children's homes, training schools, and for kids with disabilities, the Home for Incurables. By 1960, there were more than 600 of them. Most were run by churches and charities. Only 15% were state government institutions.
When you think about it, putting children into what amounts to a warehouse, a sort of holding depot, is an abusive attitude to children. So no institution, even if terribly well run, is an ideal situation for any child.
Churches almost always ran single-sex institutions. They would separate brothers and sisters, often forever. Children were told their own families didn't matter.
Pat left St Catherine's in a black car, and I was sobbing my heart out, and the nun said these words: "Stop your blubbering, your sister will come back." Like, you know, Pat left when I was 6, then Carmel just didn't come back one year after the holidays. Then James left to go up to St Augustine's, and I was left on my own.
We had been there for quite a few months before one of the sisters came up and sat beside me and had said to me that my mother had died. I guess she did it in the most gentle way that she knew how. The nuns weren't very affectionate or very warm. It was really only a few minutes that she sat with me, and then she sort of said, "All right, we'll move down to the dining room for breakfast now." At that moment, I felt I sort of had come to the realisation that this would be my home permanently for can I take a minute? I'm sorry.
I remember we grew turnips and cabbage when we were hungry. I'd come down and go some turnips.
They respected the nuns. They didn't know they were cruel. And the children never ever let on that things weren't right. And I remember saying to the priest once, "Didn't you know what the nuns were doing?" And he just shook his head and let me cry.
Well, you weren't allowed to say anything.
No, you couldn't say anything.
In 1997, there was a Senate inquiry into 30 to 50,000 stolen generation children. Then in 2001, an inquiry about 10,000 child migrants was led by Senator Andrew Murray, himself one of these migrant children. But this ignored nearly 500,000 other Australians. They wanted their inquiry too, and Senator Murray was their only hope.
They didn't know our history and that Australian kids had grown up in those same homes that child migrants had grown up in. After that inquiry was over, Senator Murray contacted Clan and said he was determined to get up